There are photos we delete, others we keep, but sometimes a single image chooses you. And when Livia Soriano pressed the camera's shutter on that seemingly ordinary Sunday, she didn't capture a moment. She captured a signal that didn't come from Earth, but from beyond it. Hours later, when she zoomed in, her heart simply stopped. Behind her father-in-law, something was there, something that hadn't been there before, something that didn't belong to the physical world, something that seemed to be staring straight at her. It wasn't a reflection. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't a trick of the mind. It was a spiritual calling, as clear as it was disturbing. A trace of a realm where memories take form, emotions have weight, and every photograph is a door, some that should never be opened. In this video, you will enter the interlume, a territory where science goes silent, the Bible whispers, and Livia's camera becomes an artifact capable of revealing what everyone feels. But no one dares to confess. Life doesn't end. It only changes its address. If you're brave, stay. If you're skeptical, doubt. If you're sensitive, prepare yourself. Because what you're about to see isn't just a story. It's a mirror of what waits for you on the other side. Hit the like button now, subscribe, and turn on notifications. After this video, you will never look at a photograph the same way again. Livia had always believed that a photograph held more than light. It held the things we're not brave enough to name. On that quiet Sunday, she only wanted to capture her father-in-law laughing in the backyard, sunlight spilling gold over the plants. The soft click of the camera felt ordinary, almost forgettable. Nothing in that moment hinted at anything strange. But mystery loves disguising itself as normality, right until it chooses to be seen. Later, as she reviewed the photos on her computer, something made her breath stumble. Behind her father-in-law, hidden in the garden's shadow, a figure appeared, one that didn't match any living presence there. It wasn't sharp, but it wasn't abstract either. It had form, intention, posture, half real, half forgotten memory. The chill running through her wasn't from the image itself, but from the overwhelming feeling that something was staring directly at her. She adjusted lighting, sharpness, zoomed in as much as the software allowed. Each adjustment seemed to bring the figure closer, as if the presence was willingly revealing itself. It was a silent collaboration, deliberate, purposeful. The camera hadn't captured an accident. It had registered an invitation, a subtle calling from somewhere life doesn't end. It only transforms. Livia leaned back as the air around her thickened, almost vibrating. She remembered her grandmother's old stories. Some presences only show themselves to those ready to see. The figure seemed tilted toward her father-in-law, as though whispering a warning, or a secret only the lens could interpret. The more she observed it, the more evident it became that this wasn't a photographic glitch. It was an intentional manifestation. What she didn't yet realize was that this photograph was a threshold, a door quietly cracking open between two worlds. The camera had awakened to something far greater, as if activated by an ancient spiritual signal. The figure behind her father-in-law wasn't a threat. It was a sign, a message from the interlume, vibrating straight into her soul. The chill she felt wasn't fear. It was recognition. The beginning of a journey she wouldn't understand until she was already too deep to turn back. That photograph showing the figure behind her father-in-law was only the first sign that something inside Livia's camera had awakened. In the days that followed, whenever she turned it on, the screen seemed to breathe, like invisible organs pulsing within the machine. Colors appeared where none existed, light passed through surfaces that should have blocked it, and sometimes a blue shimmer moved too quickly to be dismissed as a technical glitch. It was as if the camera had grown a second sight, a sight attuned to truths the physical world prefers to hide. Over time, Livia realized the camera didn't just capture images. It revealed emotional memories hidden within spaces, objects, and even people. She photographed an empty room and saw the energetic echo of someone who had once wept there. She captured a smile and found, layered behind it, the soft shadow of unresolved pain. It was unsettling, like holding an X-ray of the human soul, a map drawn from unspoken regrets, silent griefs, and affections that never found their voice. But the most disturbing part wasn't what she saw. It was what she began to hear. Some images came with a faint static, almost musical, as if distant voices were trying to break through the veil of the photograph. Not full sentences, just whispers, vibrations that touched her emotions before they touched her ears. It felt as though the camera itself was trying to communicate, guiding her toward a place where mystery and truth finally intersected. Livia began testing boundaries, photographing mirrors, metal surfaces, closed doors, darkened windows. Each shot revealed something different. Sometimes, gentle presences watching the world with childlike curiosity. Other times, dense, distorted figures shaped by centuries of unprocessed sorrow. The camera didn't choose between light and shadow. It revealed both. A neutral yet powerful artifact capable of illuminating what many spend their entire lives trying not to remember. The feeling that haunted her most was that the camera knew exactly where it wanted to take her. As though it were an ancient device, dormant for decades, awakening now because of a very specific calling. Each click brought her closer to something waiting for her in the dark. Not a threat, but a truth. The spiritual camera wasn't merely a tool. It was a bridge. And the more it revealed, the more Livia understood that this journey wasn't just beginning. It had been unfolding long before she was ever born. The first time Safra appeared, Livia didn't notice right away. She was photographing a reflection in her living room when a bluish light crossed the frame, moving with a softness that felt almost human. The light seemed to dance, float, reshape itself into something that defied logic. Only when she reviewed the image did the form begin to take shape. A feminine silhouette, elegant, with serene features radiating more peace than surprise. It was as if the light itself had chosen to take form. Livia felt the presence before she heard it. A gentle warmth touched the air, the kind that occurs when someone enters a room silently but shifts its entire energy. Then a soft, melodic voice echoed inside her mind, not through her ears. "Do not fear," the presence said, with a tone carrying centuries of compassion. This wasn't hallucination. It lacked the weight of fear and the distortion of uncertainty. Felt familiar, like meeting someone she never knew she had known. Safra revealed herself slowly, with the patience of someone who understands that spiritual awakening unfolds at its proper rhythm. She explained that she was a guide of the interlume, a plane where souls in transition learn to recognize their own truths. She said Livia's camera had not changed. It was simply aligned now with the vibrational field that Safra brought with her. Every explanation came with a softness that dissolved doubt. Her presence was unlike anything Livia had ever experienced. Safra didn't just speak. She transmitted images, sensations, memories that didn't belong to the physical world. When Livia hesitated, Safra showed glimpses of the interlume through the camera. Landscapes made of conscious light, fields that moved like breathing organisms, and luminous trails that followed the emotional rhythm of those who walked through them. It was a universe as vast as it was subtle, as real as it was invisible. But even with all her serenity, Safra made one truth unmistakably clear. Her appearance was no accident. She had been drawn by the energetic rupture revealed in the photograph of the father-in-law, a bridge forming between dimensions. And she came because something far greater was beginning to move. Safra looked at Livia with an indescribable depth and, before fading, said only, "You were chosen to see what many fear remembering." This wasn't the end of the revelation. It was the opening act. Noah appeared for the first time as a faint blur on the edge of a photograph Livia had taken of an empty hallway. Unlike the other presences, he seemed hesitant, unsure whether to approach or fade away. His form was young, but fractured, as if part of him still struggled to understand he no longer belonged to the physical world. Yet there was something unmistakably human in his posture. A silent plea for help that crossed the image and struck directly at Livia's heart. In the days that followed, Noah began appearing more often. Sometimes in a window's reflection, sometimes in the bathroom mirror, and one particularly still night, he appeared behind her in the camera's live view, watching with a mixture of fear and hope. Livia felt a tightness in her chest. Not from threat, not from fear. It was the feeling of finding a lost child in a vast, unfamiliar place. His spiritual vulnerability pulled her in, urging her to listen even without knowing whether he could speak. When he finally communicated, it wasn't through words, but through images projected by the camera. Flashes of a life cut short too early, disjointed memories, fragments of a name that dissolved every time it began to form. Noah's presence vibrated like someone trying desperately to remember who they were but trapped in an emotional labyrinth built from their own fears. Livia understood that his confusion didn't come from death itself, but from what had led to it. Safra, always watching from a gentle distance, explained that some spirits awaken without memory when burdened by deep guilt. Guilt strong enough to shatter the perception of self. Noah was one of these rare cases. He didn't know who he was, where he came from, or why he still lingered. He was a soul split in half, trying to assemble pieces that refused to fit. The only constant was the energetic bond he formed with Livia, as if he had recognized her before knowing his own name. The connection between them grew in ways neither could explain. Something in Noah's fractured gaze awakened in Livia an almost maternal instinct, a profound desire to protect him, guide him, offer him what she herself never received, a clear path toward healing. And even though she didn't understand why he had attached himself specifically to her, a powerful intuition whispered that none of this was random. Noah wasn't just lost, he was trapped, and the camera once again would be the key to revealing why. The shadows of the shared focus appeared on the first night Noah tried to come too close to Livia. She was reviewing a recently taken photograph when she noticed, behind the fragmented figure of the young spirit, something twisting like dense smoke, yet moving with deliberate purpose. Dark, elongated forms watched Noah with a silent hunger. Unlike the luminous presences the camera had revealed so far, these entities carried an emotional heaviness that drained the room of color. Livia felt the temperature drop, not physically, but in her soul, as though the shadows siphoned emotional warmth from everything they touched. Safra, who rarely manifested so abruptly, appeared at once, her blue radiance spreading through the environment to keep the entities at bay. She explained that the shadows were living projections of guilt, fear, and denial, formed from repressed emotional memories of trapped spirits. Noah, in his fragmented state, was especially vulnerable. It was as if his unresolved pain called to them. Their behavior was almost parasitic. They approached Noah with slow, serpentine movements, attempting to coil around his energy and consume the fragile identity he still possessed. The more he tried to remember who he was, the more agitated they became, feeding on that very struggle. The camera captured everything. Dark lines moving like emotional tentacles, trying to drag him into regions of the interlume where lost souls dissolve into oblivion. It was a silent yet devastating spectacle. Even without understanding the full mechanics of that spiritual plane, Livia felt she couldn't let Noah be taken. There was a connection between them that defied logic and time, something that pulsed in her chest whenever he showed fear. Safra explained that the shadows only held power over those who avoided their own truth, and that the only way to weaken them was to illuminate what they tried to conceal. Once again, the camera would be essential. It didn't merely record their appearance, but the emotional origin behind them. In that moment, Livia understood the true weight of her journey. Noah's presence wasn't just a chance encounter. It was a calling to confront what hides beneath human pain, what forms when feelings are buried instead of understood. The shadows of the shared focus weren't only after Noah. They stalked any soul that denied its own story. And as Livia watched their restless movements, she sensed that soon she would have to face them herself. Not by choice, but by destiny. Solange had always felt that her mother watched over her even after death, though she never understood the soft presence that hovered around her life. Sometimes it came as a sudden shiver, other times as a calmness washing over her without warning. But everything changed when she found Livia's camera tucked away in a drawer. The moment she touched it, a warm, pulse-like energy traveled through her hand, as if the object were recognizing her after a long separation. In the days that followed, Solange started noticing subtle signs. Photos taken without meaning to were filled with blue glimmers and small distortions, the same glow that used to appear in Livia's images before she died. It was as though the camera remained connected to her mother, acting as a spiritual thread unbroken by physical death. Solange, though unsure of the mechanics, knew deep down that she wasn't imagining it. Something within that camera still breathed. Gradually, she noticed gentle shadows appearing behind her in some photos. Not threatening, but protective, almost maternal. They shaped themselves like comforting arms, especially on days when loneliness weighed heavier. It was impossible not to recognize that energy. It felt exactly like running into Livia's embrace as a child. Somehow, the camera transformed longing into presence, and presence into guidance. The spiritual bond grew stronger the night Solange dreamt of her mother for the first time since her passing. Livia said nothing in the dream, merely pointed toward the camera as if whispering, "I'm still here." When Solange awoke, the camera was turned on by itself, displaying an image she had never taken. A blue beam of light forming the outline of an outstretched hand. It was beyond coincidence. It was communication. Their connection transcended time and death, and Solange began to understand she did not need to fear absence. She needed to learn how to interpret the signs. The camera was not just a keepsake. It was a portal, an emotional and spiritual bridge linking their two worlds. And although much remained unclear, something deep within her whispered that Livia was preparing to send a message, one that would change everything. Teo Soriano had always struggled with deep emotions, and Livia's death only magnified what he tried so hard to hide from himself. He carried old wounds buried under layers so dense that he no longer noticed when they shifted from feelings to weight. To everyone else, Teo seemed functional, steady, almost untouched by loss. But inside him, a hollow space grew slowly, one that no work, conversation, or distraction could ever fill. It was like living inside a room whose walls crept closer every day. Livia's absence haunted him in small details. The coffee cooling on the table, the scent he sometimes imagined drifting through the hallway, even the exaggerated silence of the house. But what hurt the most were the unresolved truths between them. Words he never said, apologies that never left his throat. He carried resentment disguised as pride, and that pride had become his emotional prison. Teo believed that grieving meant hardening, when in truth he was only drifting further from himself. Solange saw this from a distance, feeling her father slip away a little more each day. His eyes always seemed lost, chasing memories he avoided facing directly. In the rare moments they spoke, Teo sidestepped Livia's name like one avoids touching an open wound. And though he aimed to protect Solange from his grief, his silence only deepened the emotional gap between them. The house, once full of life, now felt like a museum of quiet. But something shifted when Solange mentioned the camera and the strange phenomena that had begun to happen. For the first time in years, a faint, fragile spark lit up in Teo's eyes. Not curiosity, but fear. He knew Livia's intuitive side better than anyone, and if something was truly trying to communicate through the camera, it might be tied to what he was most afraid to confront. It was an ancient fear, the fear of being seen for who he truly was. The truth was that Teo carried far more guilt than he dared admit. Guilt for harsh words, for long silences, for loving in ways that came too late or too imperfectly. And while he tried to hide that pain beneath the mask of strength, a quiet realization began to form inside him. Livia might not be as distant as he believed, and sooner or later, he would have to face not only his grief, but himself. The camera, which until now had served as a bridge between worlds and a tool for external revelations, began to turn its gaze toward Livia herself. Every photo taken within the interlume reflected not only the spiritual landscape but pieces of her being she had hidden throughout her life. It was like looking into a mirror that didn't show a face but emotional wounds. The blue glow revealed flaws she tried to ignore, silences that left deep marks, and choices she had forgotten but that still echoed inside her. In one of the images, Livia saw herself split into two versions, the strong woman she presented to the world and the fragile one she concealed even from herself. The photograph captured a luminous crack between the two, as if the camera insisted there was an unresolved conflict living there. She felt the weight of all the times she suppressed pain to avoid worrying her family, Of all the moments she silenced her feelings to maintain the illusion of stability. It hurt more than any shadow entity because it was real. Saphira, serene as always, approached and explained that no spirit evolves without first seeing what the heart itself refuses to acknowledge. The interlume, she said, was not only a place of transition but of inward revelation. The photographs, therefore, were more than images. They were invitations. Invitations to face her shadows, not the external ones, but the ones she crafted throughout her life. And each revelation offered a chance for liberation, if she could gaze at it without looking away. The shadows of her guilt began to manifest as well. In one photo, she saw the exact moment she unintentionally hurt her daughter. In another, a distorted memory of an argument with Teo, where her own emotional rigidity prevented reconciliation. It was as if the camera showed not only what had happened, but what could have happened if vulnerability had been allowed. And that brought a different kind of pain, a pain that does not accuse but awakens. Despite the discomfort, something inside Livia grew lighter. It was like removing pieces of weight stitched to her chest for years. She finally understood that her journey wasn't only about helping Noah or protecting Solange. It was about rediscovering herself. The camera wasn't revealing her flaws just to expose them. It was offering a path to healing. And the more Livia faced her hidden truths, the closer she felt to a freedom she never realized she needed. Noah's memories began to surface like photographs burned around the edges, revealing little, yet meaning everything. The camera captured flashes of his past life. A small hand holding his, a simple room with toys scattered about, a worn-out sneaker running along a narrow street. Each image appeared incomplete, as if covered by an emotional fog that Noah himself had created for protection. He looked at the photos with a dazed expression, like someone trying to remember a dream that slips away just as consciousness returns. As Livia approached, the images grew clearer, almost as if her presence strengthened the fractured identity of the young spirit. In one photograph, Noah knelt beside a broken bicycle, gazing at someone outside the frame with deep sadness. In another, he sat in a park, hugging what seemed to be a younger brother, both surrounded by an emotion so tender it transcended the spiritual veil. It became evident that love and pain were tightly interwoven in his story. But there was something darker in the images. Blotches, like emotional stains clinging to his memories, preventing him from remembering fully. Saphira explained that these marks were remnants of guilt, pieces of fear forming inner barriers when a spirit believes it has failed irreversibly. Noah recoiled every time he saw them, as if touched by something painful. Even without remembering what happened, his spiritual body reacted as though carrying a wound that still burned. Gradually, Livia realized Noah didn't fear the memories. He feared what they might reveal about him. The camera showed that he had not died in peace. There was a pivotal moment, an emotional rupture, still hidden behind the images. And each time the lens neared that moment, the shadows of the shared focus appeared, restless, trying to block the full revelation. It was as if something inside Noah believed that facing the truth would cause him to disappear. Yet hope remained. In one of the latest photographs, a blurry image showed Noah holding the hand of a younger boy, protecting him instinctively. Even in fragments, Noah revealed who he truly was, someone who loved fiercely. And that was when Livia understood. The guilt imprisoning him didn't come from what he was, but from what he believed he had done. The camera, yet again, was not merely showing facts. It was pointing toward the truth he feared the most. The central shadow appeared the moment Noah drew closest to the emotional truth he had been avoiding. Unlike the other shared focus shadows, this one didn't merely approach. It grew, expanded, taking on a nearly human shape distorted by Noah's deepest fears. Its presence made the interlume tremble softly, as if the spiritual plane itself acknowledged the gravity of the encounter. It was guilt made flesh, a monstrous reflection of what Noah believed was his unforgivable failure. Livia sensed the entity before she saw it. The air thickened, colors dimmed, and the camera began to vibrate as though under immense pressure. When she lifted the viewfinder, she found Noah staring at the central shadow with a terror born not of the present, but of a buried past. The entity advanced slowly, whispering fragments of memories Noah had fought to suppress. Each step it took seemed to reopen an emotional wound. Safra appeared beside Livia, her blue light flickering like a flame under strong wind. She explained that the central shadow was the final barrier between Noah and his liberation, the embodiment of his deepest guilt, the one he believed he never deserved forgiveness for. To confront it, physical resistance was meaningless. He would need to acknowledge the truth behind the trauma. And once again, the camera held the key. If it could capture the essence of the shadow, it could reveal what Noah had hidden from himself. With trembling hands, Livia aimed the camera at the entity. As the shutter prepared to close, images began appearing on the screen. Rapid, painful flashes like emotional lightning. Noah running through a narrow street, a small boy calling for help, and the central shadow emerging not as a monster, but as a warped version of Noah himself, desperate to save someone. Each fragment weakened the entity, making it writhe as if resisting exposure. The truth was inches away from breaking through. But at the decisive moment, when Noah stepped forward, the shadow lunged violently, as though trying to halt the revelation. Spiritual shockwaves burst across the interlume, forming a field of energy that enveloped all three, Noah, Livia, and the entity. The camera shone with an intense blue-white glow, as if burning its own essence to capture the truth. And in the profound silence that followed, it became clear. The battle was never against the shadow, but against the emotional lie that gave birth to it. When the camera's light finally pierced through the central shadow, something within the interlume opened like a torn veil. Noah froze, staring at the space where the entity had vanished, until new images began to rise around him. Not projected by the camera, but by his own awakening spiritual memory. He saw a narrow street, heard muffled screams, and felt his body running with fierce urgency. It was like reliving a moment that had always existed only as nameless pain. The scene unfolded further. The little boy who appeared repeatedly in the photos, the same child Noah was often shown hugging, was running ahead, terrified, while a car sped too quickly around the corner. Noah remembered the panic, the instinctual decision, the desperate leap. He saw the exact moment he pushed his younger brother out of the way, saving him. And then, for the first time, he witnessed the impact that brought him down. There was no failure there. There was sacrifice. A love so profound that it defied death itself. Noah fell to his knees, not from pain but from relief. Every dark weight trapping him had been built from the belief that he had failed, that his death was the result of a mistake. But the truth was entirely different. He did not fail, he saved. The boy lived because Noah gave everything he had in one final act of courage. The shadows that tormented him were not echoes of reality, but distortions created by a heart that never learned to accept its own goodness. Safra approached with a gentle, almost maternal glow as Noah cried an emotion that doesn't exist in the physical world. A blend of release, recognition, and absolute love. She explained that many spirits remain trapped not because of what they did, but because of what they believe they did. And Noah, being sensitive and protective, carried that weight for years, even after death. Now that the truth had been revealed, the guilt lost its grip, and the interlume began to recognize him not as a fragmented spirit, but as one ready to ascend. Livia watched everything with quiet tears. Seeing Noah finally free awakened a deep understanding within her about her own path of healing. The truth doesn't destroy, it frees. The camera in her hand flickered as if celebrating, as though this moment fulfilled an ancient purpose. Noah lifted his gaze to her and, for the first time, smiled fully. And in that smile was the certainty that his journey was about to transform forever. When the truth finally settled within Noah, a soft light bloomed from his chest, expanding in waves that pulsed like breaths of relief. The interlume responded instantly. The luminous ground beneath him brightened, and the space around him opened invisible pathways, as if acknowledging that he had shed the weight keeping him bound. There were no fractures left in his spiritual form. He was whole for the first time since his death, and that wholeness radiated a peace that touched everything around him. Livia watched the transformation with a blend of reverence and pride. The energy emanating from Noah was more than liberation. It was gratitude, deep and wordless, directed toward her. He approached, his edges now clear and shimmering, and held her hands with a strength that didn't hurt but carried meaning. There were no words in the interlume to express what he felt, so he shared images instead. His younger brother smiling, the life saved, and the certainty that his sacrifice had never been a failure. Saphra smiled gently as Noah's ascension drew near. She explained that spirits freed from guilt become capable of accessing higher planes, realms where consciousness is no longer fragmented by pain, but expanded by truth. Noah looked around, amazed, noticing that the dim gray that once surrounded him had transformed into vibrant hues of living light. It was as though the interlume were celebrating his courage, honoring his journey, and opening space for his next spiritual step. Before leaving, Noah turned to Livia one last time. His expression carried something she recognized deeply, the desire to thank her not only for helping him remember, but for seeing him when he could not see himself. The camera in Livia's hands emitted a faint blue glow, as if recording the moment not to store it, but to honor it. Noah touched the camera gently, and a small luminous spark detached from him, entering the lens and settling there. A symbol of eternal gratitude. And then it happened. Noah's spiritual body dissolved into shimmering particles, rising like stardust carried by an unseen breeze. There was no sadness in the farewell, only completeness. Livia felt a warm wave pass through her, as if part of Noah's light had chosen to remain with her. Saphra softly confirmed that bonds formed in truth are never undone. Noah departed in peace, leaving behind not just presence, but purpose. Noah's liberation left a sacred silence around Livia, as if the entire interlume breathed with her. For the first time since arriving in that realm, she felt light, not just in her spiritual form, but in her soul. By helping Noah find his truth, she had awakened something within herself that had been dormant for years. It wasn't a feeling of mission accomplished, but of revelation. A deep understanding that healing never flows in only one direction. When we help someone heal, forgotten parts of us heal as well. The camera returned to a serene state, no longer vibrating with distress, only emitting a soft, steady glow like a calm heartbeat. As Livia revisited the photos captured throughout her journey, she noticed many had changed. Where she once saw fractures, shadows, and distortions, she now saw clarity, harmony, and lessons instead of failures. It was as if the interlume rewrote her memories as she released her old guilt. Each photograph seemed to hold her hand and whisper, "You did your best." Saphra approached, carrying that blue tranquility that filled the deepest spaces of the soul. She explained that Livia's healing wasn't in acknowledging her mistakes, but in viewing them with compassion, the same compassion she had offered Noah. Many spirits arrived in the interlume believing they must give explanations, when in truth, they needed to forgive themselves. And Livia was finally ready to see herself with truth, without judgment, with courage to embrace her own humanity. Then Livia saw a photograph she never took, one that appeared on the camera on its own. It showed her holding Solange as a child, smiling a smile she didn't remember allowing herself in many years. The image carried a silent message, that despite imperfections, there had always been love, enough love to cross worlds. A warm wave washed over her as the last piece of her old pain dissolved, the pain of believing she had not been the perfect mother. She realized, at last, that perfection was never what her daughter needed, and never what she should have demanded of herself. With her heart finally at peace, Livia felt the interlume respond once more. The spiritual plane opened around her, recognizing that her stage of healing was complete. Saphra smiled, not as a guide now, but as a friend, and told her that there was one final task she needed to complete before moving on, one that connected Livia to the physical world in a profound way. The journey wasn't over yet, but for the first time, Livia felt ready to finish it without carrying any weight at all. Livia knew her journey in the interlume was nearing its end, but before moving forward, there was something her heart insisted on completing. The bond with Solange remained alive, glowing like a thread of light that transcended death itself. Saphra explained that spirits who reach profound clarity may send one final message to the physical world. Not a warning, but an act of love. Livia held the camera and felt that it, too, awaited this moment, as if aware that its mission had one final spark to ignite. In the interlume, images were not simply recorded, they were manifested. So when Livia lifted the camera, she wasn't capturing a landscape. She was capturing the emotion she carried for her daughter. The image began to form, first a soft golden glow, then a gentle outline, until a scene emerged that felt more like memory than photograph. She and Solange embracing, wrapped in serene light that expressed everything unsaid during her life. The picture wasn't a real moment from the past, but the emotional truth of an entire lifetime. Safra guided her to take the image to the threshold of the interlume, a region where vibrations of different planes intermingle. There, the camera shone brighter than ever, releasing a blue radiance that seemed to pierce space itself. The photograph detached from the screen like luminous dust and traveled across dimensions. In the physical world, at that very moment, Livia's camera, resting in Solange's room, powered on by itself, displaying the newly formed image. In the human world, Solange awoke with a warm sensation spreading through her chest. She walked to the camera and saw the glowing portrait, an embrace she had no memory of, yet instantly recognized its meaning. It held love, farewell, and reconciliation, all condensed into a single image. She touched the screen and felt a gentle shiver, not of fear but of comfort. It was as if her mother were holding her again, now from a place where pain no longer existed. Back in the interlume, Livia felt the cord connecting her to her daughter vibrate softly. It was not a severing, but a continuation. She knew Solange would no longer feel lost, for she now carried with her not just memories, but a living gift, proof that love does not end, it transforms. Safra approached and opened the path to the next realm with a serene gesture. Livia's journey was complete, and as she stepped into the light, she knew the gift she left behind would echo through generations. In the end, when the lights of the interlume closed behind Livia Soriano, it became clear that no photograph, in this world or the next, is ever just a record. Every image is an echo, a bridge, a reminder that life continues far beyond what human perception can grasp. Noah found peace. Safra fulfilled her purpose. And Livia discovered that the greatest revelation wasn't in the shadows she saw, but in the shadows she finally had the courage to illuminate within herself. The camera she left behind, now charged with invisible meaning, was never just a supernatural object. It was a symbol, a reminder that what we feel but don't understand is often trying to guide us toward something greater. Solange received her mother's final gift and, with it, a truth that many people spend their whole lives running from. Love doesn't die. It simply changes form, crosses realms, and manifests where we least expect, even in a simple photograph forgotten in a drawer. And now I ask you, what would you do if you found a photo like that? Would you face it or delete it? Would you believe or run? And above all, who do you think would be trying to speak to you? Comment below. I want to know your interpretation, your experiences, your view on life after death. If this video touched you in any way, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share it with someone who needs to hear this story. Sometimes, a single image is enough to awaken an entire soul. And remember, a camera captures what the light shows, but reveals what the heart hides.